back to your point about selective attention and going back to that point about the noise irrelevance. Does anybody know what the sweetest sound to anybody's ears is? It's a quote from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, but it's basically the sweetest sound that anybody or any person can hear is what? Or yes, close. Unless you have a terminal disease. Yes, it's not good. Okay, what's up?
Is it the voice of someone you love or something like that?
Not quite. We just don't like people, right? We just want to go to Pluto. We like silence. Yeah. No, it's your name. It's your name. Well, hypothetically speaking, if you're in a large crowd and there's a lot of noise where you can't really pick out all the stimulus because people are talking and someone yells your name, what are you immediately going to do? You turn around because that what? Grabs your attention, right? So this is known as the cocktail party effect, basically being able to discern between loud noises or irrelevant sounds from the actual stimulus at play. And so selective attention itself focuses on that particular aspect, focusing on one thing and selecting and basically creating a tunnel vision for it, allowing you to ignore pretty much all other stimulus, okay? Does that make sense so far? Okay. Yes?
I don't know, it's probably a weird question. Do you know how, like, let's say, like, there's a crowd, right?
Yeah.
And, like, when you look in the crowd, for example, you automatically see your mom.
Well, you're activating a particular process, a manual process, a conscious process. We'll talk about them like literally the next 15 minutes here. But what you're doing is you're activating a conscious process to manually search for your mom, right? Mentally. And so because you already know your mom's face or her features, maybe what she's wearing, you don't even have to really know what she's wearing, but you know her physical features, and you can pick her out relatively quickly. And so your brain has an easier time of discerning objects that you already are familiar with. And so you're able to selectively tailor your attention to those features and easily pick out your mom pretty quickly. In terms of rate at which you can pick out your mom, it's actually relatively quickly that you could pick her out over a random stranger in a crowd. Like, so if you were given a photo of somebody and told to do the same task, pick out that person in a crowd, you would have a harder time, even if you memorize all the features, because you're still having to process that information. It's something fascinating about your mom or someone that you're familiar with that you're able to pick them out quicker because of the selective process. And I do have a video on this selective process. So if we could, I want you to try your hardest as you're watching this video to count the number of times the ball passes between the players in white. How many of you have seen this before? Yes, if you have seen this before, please don't spoil the actual number or anything like that, because I'm going to try my best to distract you, and I want you to get this number right, okay? You're going to do your best to get the number right. And if you don't get the number right, there will be points deducted, okay? So this is called the monkey business experiment. Of course. There we go. Hit back. There we go.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Okay, so this weekend I am going to the Fern Bank with my daughter. It's going to be my daughter's first time at the Fern Bank. It's going to be pretty cool. She's never seen a giant skeleton or a dinosaur before, so I'm hoping that it doesn't frighten her. I've been making her a ton of toys with 3D printing, but she doesn't seem very interested, unfortunately. I make them in all of her favorite colors, but for some reason, pink is her favorite. I don't know why. It's pretty cool. She knows pink, she knows purple, she knows red, she knows blue, she knows green, she knows black, she knows all these cool colors. She counts 16.
Did you spot the gorilla?
Did you spot the gorilla?
Yes.
You did.
People who haven't seen or heard
How many of you spotted the gorilla if you had not seen this before? Okay, good.
If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game?
So much happened just because you were paying attention. Boom.
Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player. And
Starts banging his chest too, right in front of you. Ain't that crazy?
The girl walked out. I saw the girl walk
And the color changed. That's kind of crazy, right? And so when we're actually perfect. So when we're actually creating this selective tunnel vision, we're focusing on one aspect of the problem. That problem in this scenario was count the number of times the ball passed between the players. So again, show of hands, how many people actually saw the gorilla? Missed everything. That's okay. That's the whole point of this. Your attention is a resource. So if I can hammer anything home from this lesson, it's that your attention is a resource. You have a finite amount of it. This is why you pay with your attention. You pay attention to your homework, to your lectures, to whatever it is you're trying to focus on. And so throughout the day, we deplete that resource. I think studies show that you have the most attention during the morning times, right when you wake up. And then over time throughout the day, you start to deplete that resource. And so this is why it's important to start off your day with all the more difficult tasks that require a lot more attention. But again, paying with your attention. We'll see that one of the primary definitions here in just a second of consciousness ties heavily into attention. Okay? You had a question.
Yeah, I heard, well, while watching that, I did count the 16 passes, but I did also hear you talking about your daughter, how she wants to see the dinosaur,
Yeah.
She don't like it because she likes pink and purple and stuff like that. So is it a way that people can, is that count as multitasking?
It does. And so I'm glad you bring that up because how many of us believe that we're multitaskers? Okay, we're not as much multitaskers as we really think we are, or we like to think we are. How many of us, it is very hard. How many of us play music? Yes. Any instruments? What kind of instrument? Guitar. Okay, you sing and play at the same time? Yes, and when you are first starting out to sing and play, anybody else play music? Yes, yes. What do you play?
Guitar, drums, bass.
Dang, the whole set. One-man band. So, but when you guys started out playing, when you were starting to multitask with maybe a rhythm on one hand and notes on the other, and maybe even trying to sing at the same time while you're doing it, it's rather difficult the first few times that you're trying to start learning an instrument and singing at the same time. Well, why? Well, because you're trying two new things at once that require a lot of conscious effort and a lot of conscious energy. How many of you can draw a triangle with one hand and a circle with the other? Why don't we just go ahead, try it out. Let's see how successful we are. Yeah. On a square, you're adding an extra corner in the triangle, making it a circle angle. I don't know what it is. But basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell your brain to work on two cognitive processes at the same time. They both require energy. But over time, practice makes perfect. Okay? And so when you're working on playing a guitar or an instrument and at the same time singing, one of those two things has to become more habitual. They have to become more second nature. They have to require less energy for your brain to actually work on and focus on. And so talking and listening at the same time as watching a visual stimulus, that's using two different sensory inputs. So maybe it's a little bit easier than trying to intake all the information from one sensory input. Like you were counting the number of balls that were passed back and forth, but you were also tasked with spotting, both two tasks involving your eyes, the gorilla moving through. But you're not having to divide that attention between two different senses when I'm over here talking to you about my daughter and her adventures this weekend. And you were also paying attention to the number of times the ball bounced back and forth, which is really cool. Not to say that you should go try to multitask with multiple senses like that. Texting and driving, you're using multiple senses at the same time. You're not as good at it as you think you are. If I can hammer anything home, please don't text and drive. Your rate of getting into an accident when you text and drive is significantly higher. I know that's a lot coming from your psych professor, but just don't do it, okay? The more selective you are, paying attention to something that you deem as more important, the less attention you're paying to your surroundings, okay? Does that make sense? Again, just to hammer home, though, when you learn something and make it second nature over time, you're firing neural pathways, you're firing those axons, and carving out paths in your brain that make it easier later on for you to basically pick it up and do it second nature, requiring less energy. The more you practice, the less energy it costs, okay? Okay, so we're going to skip that because we already watched that. And so the one thing we need to highlight here is this inattentional blindness, okay? The failure to detect unexpected events when attention is engaged by a task, okay? That's important because basically if you did not spot the gorilla because you were paying selective attention to the number of times the balls bounce back and forth, you had an inattentional blindness, okay? Inability to see the gorilla.